often associate success with the opportunities that we get. But in my own experience, success is less about the opportunities we get. It's more about how we deal with the challenges that we come across. I grew up in a then small town, small village called Rongo. My childhood was very ordinary, like any other rural childhood. I walked to school, walked back home for lunch. In my idle time, I would climb mango trees, get fresh mangoes, guava trees, get fresh guavas, walk to the river to fetch water, bathed in the open. Very simple life. My mom was a teacher at Rongo Primary School. My dad worked in a sugar factory. I was also a student at Rongo Primary School, and I was a good student. I was always top 10 in class. But like any other parents, my parents wanted me to get a better life. So they decided to send me to a different school. They sent me to Mumias Boys boarding. Then a good school, and I still believe a good school, at least by KCPE standards of performance. So I joined Mumias Boys boarding in class 5. As soon as I joined Mumias Boys boarding, I felt different. I felt the top performing boy from Rongo Primary all of a sudden was performing at the bottom of the class. And that happened in class 5, class 6, and class 7. When I got my report card at the end of class 7, I took a step back and told myself, if I continue like this, this is going to be my life for the rest of my life. So I decided I'm going to repeat class 7 so that I have a better shot when I sit my KCPE exam in class 8. Somebody recently asked me, what did your parents say when you told them that you wanted to repeat class 7? To be honest, I can't remember, but knowing my dad, he probably wondered why it took me so long to figure out that I needed to repeat a class so that I can move forward. So anyway, I repeated class 7, I worked pretty hard, I regained my confidence, and then started performing again at the top of class, somewhere around top 10. Finished class 7, did class 8, did well in KCPE, joined Alliance High School. When I joined Alliance High School, I was very cautious that the transition from Rongo to Mumias was not going to happen again as I transitioned from Mumias to Alliance High School. So I worked pretty hard, didn't face any challenge other than what I would call minor inferiorities. I was in the group of kids that were known to be from Ushago, and there was another camp of kids that came from town. And where you could actually see the difference was during visiting day. If you came from Ushago, your parents would come visiting you with some sort of kikapu or kiondo, and the best that would come out of that kiondo, at the top is probably chapatis and mandazis, and from there it's all downhill. Boiled maize, boiled eggs, avocados. And then imagine at the end of the day, when it's the end of visiting day and everybody goes back to the dorm, you walk in with your boiled whatever, and you have another roommate who walks in with a cheeseburger. In fact, the first time I ever heard the word cheeseburger was at Alliance High School when a friend of mine, after being visited, had a bag of goodies, and I asked him what was that, and he said cheeseburgers, chips, sausages. Anyway, I did well at Alliance High School and got admitted to law school at University of Nairobi. Now, then, when you finished high school, you had 2 years before you actually joined campus. So I decided that I want to while away my time at Strathmore University. I went to Strathmore, looked at many courses. Then I asked my parents, which one would you sponsor me? I really wanted to do computers. My dad told me that, look, by then computers were just emerging. This computer thing is a passing cloud. Why don't you take accounting? I'm willing to pay for accounting. It's enduring. Accountants have been there since the beginning of business. So I decided to take accounting. Did a few courses. All of a sudden, I realized a couple of my friends were leaving to go abroad. And I said, I know these guys. They are not any smarter than I am, so I'm also going to look into going abroad. I applied to a couple of schools, ended up going to Monmouth University in New Jersey, just because I had relatives there. I got to Monmouth University. Then I discovered that if I continued my passion of pursuing law, it was going to take me 4 years undergrad, then 3 years in law school. I would take 7 years to become a lawyer. On the other side, if I decided to become an accountant, I was going to get credit, almost 1 year credit for the work I'd done at Strathmore. So I was left with only 3 years to become an accountant. I thought about it and said, you know, I'll leave this law thing alone. Let me take 3 years to become an accountant rather than 7 years to become a lawyer. My dad had given me enough money for 1 semester. 3 years has 6 semesters in it. So I had to figure out how to pay for the other 5 semesters. I'd gotten a partial scholarship, but nothing big. So I did odd jobs. I was a waiter, groundsman, loaded trucks, and yes, I was a security guard, what you'd call a watchie. Of all those jobs, the one I liked the most was the watchie job. Now, being a watchie in the US is a little bit different from being a watchie here. It's not like you are out there in the cold with a Rongo. You are actually seated in a room watching screens connected to a camera and monitoring the site. Now, the reason why I liked that job, it was pretty much the only job where within an 8-hour span, you could actually study, you could sleep, and get paid. So most of my life as a student, I was in school during the day, would go home, take a nap, and then I would go become a watchie, because that's when I could study, I could get some sleep, and I could get paid so that I could pay for my school. That was most of my life in college. It was challenging, but I knew that I had to go through that in order to get out and get a job. Unfortunately, some of my friends and some relatives, some very close, never made it out of those odd jobs, and up to today are still doing those odd jobs. Anyway, I finished Monmouth University, and I take a little bit time before I actually get my professional job as an accountant at KPMG. So I continued doing this watchie job for a little bit, and I loved it so much that one day I couldn't actually make it to work, and I had a friend called Jared. Jared was a little taller than I am, and I told Jared, why don't you take this access key and my uniform and go monitor the site for me, because I want to get paid. So Jared takes my uniform, puts on the trouser. Given that he's a little tall, the trouser reaches somewhere here, above the ankle. But I say, there's nobody at site, just go. He goes to site, and as fate would have it, that's the day my boss shows up to the site. And the boss tells him, but you are not Edwin. And that would be the end of that particular job. But luckily, I now had a job at KPMG as an accountant. I find another challenge. One day, I go to work. I was now in my second year as an accountant. And I have my colleague who's my assistant, white, tall boy. We go to a client. It's the first time I'm reporting there. The client comes to the reception, goes directly to my colleague and says, hi, Edwin, because in their mind, the leader in that team was the white boy. Now, I could have complained or felt bad about it, but I said, you know what, over time, they'll understand my work and they'll accept who I am. As I was doing accounting at KPMG, in the evenings, I would have a side hustle, doing taxes for Kenyans. Tax returns in the US is very serious business. It seems even in Kenya it's going to become very serious business. So I do taxes for a guy called John. And as an accountant at KPMG, within the Kenyan circles, my peers, I was doing very well. But when I looked at John's taxes, this guy was making 10 times, almost 10 times what I was making. So I wondered, John, what is this that you do? He says, I do something called investment banking. So I said, okay. I was not in love with accounting. I got into that profession as a convenience. What is this investment banking thing? So he explains it to me and tells me to do investment banking, you have to go to one of these top schools and you have to do something called GMAT, Graduate Management Aptitude Test. So I started doing it. I do the first test, I didn't pass. I do it the second time, I failed even harder. Then I do it the third time, I passed good enough to get into Wharton. I got into Wharton, it was not that challenging. In fact, I realized the hardest thing about Wharton was getting in. Once you got in, everything was fine. So I do Wharton, finish, join investment banking. I do investment banking for around 6-7 years, Lehman Brothers, Bank of America. And my department was this group called Mergers and Acquisitions for Banks. Now, when you are doing mergers and acquisitions for banks, you are talking to decision makers and convincing them whether to sell their bank, to merge their bank, or to buy another bank. If you're doing it within New York, it's fine. But now imagine if you're sent to the Midwest, a place like Idaho. Now, for those who know Idaho, when you think about Idaho, you think about potatoes. It is as rural as it gets. So I get sent to a community bank in Idaho. You get into the boardroom, and every time you would speak, this person would ask, can you say it again? I didn't hear you. I didn't understand. So I realized this is not my kind of thing. If I'm going to do it, I don't see myself growing that much in this kind of thing. I was probably the first Black African with an accent to enter that particular boardroom, so I don't see how this CEO is going to trust me to give him advice on what to do with his bank. So I start having ideas about coming back to Kenya. Now, by then, I'm married to Gertrude. She's in the hall. Now, as you can imagine, it's very hard when you're in a good job, at least by pay, to go to your wife and say, I feel like I want to leave this job and go to Kenya and look for something. For those who are married, you know those are conversations you have with yourself, and you pack it, and you pack it and wait. So I thought about coming back, but an opportunity never came. But the global financial crisis came at one point. Things got hard. I was laid off. Now, I could have complained, but I said, now this is my opportunity. With this layoff letter and package, I can now actually say, why can't I go back to Kenya and look for something? We have a discussion. I come back to Kenya. I look for something, did a few things here and there. Nothing really stood out. So I decided I'm going to go back to New York, join my family, and look for a job and continue with life. About a week before my flight, I get a call from, I would say, a very important mzee in this town. We have a talk back and forth, and at the end of that discussion, I get an offer to be CEO of Britam Asset Managers. Now, Britam Asset Managers by then had around 35 people. Before that, the biggest team I'd ever managed was a team of 3. So how am I going to live? How am I going to transition from managing small teams of 3 to managing 35? Anyway, I joined. We worked together, grew the firm, moved from number 6 asset management company to number 1, from 20 million of profitability to 300 million. At the end of the 3rd year, we had a difference in opinion. Perfectly reasonable people can disagree. So we said, to hell with this. We are going to get together as colleagues, myself, my colleague called Elizabeth, my colleague called Patricia, I think she's somewhere here, and then my colleague called Shiv. We get together, debate, form a name, form a company. September 12th, 2014, we start this company called Cytonn, and we start hustling for business. October 31st, I'm called to the reception, and I'm told that we've been served with a lawsuit. Now, I'd never really been sued properly before. This time, I saw 3 boxes. So I asked myself, this looks strange. What could possibly be written that can actually fit 3 boxes? But we said, okay, we'll deal with it. This looks like a challenge. Now, we could have sat there and started saying, now we can't run this business. Now we've been sued. And I think the total claims were almost like 9 billion Kenya shillings. So we say, okay, it seems like this is meant to break the team spirit and scatter the business. So we talk to people around town, and they tell us, okay, I think the best place to go on these financial matters that are complicated and litigation is a company called Oraro and Company Advocates. We find our way there. We meet a lawyer called Walter, and we essentially leave Walter with all those lawsuits to deal with. We are back to running our business. All looks good. November 7th, it was a Friday. I got to work at around 8:30. Did normal morning catch-up. At around 9:40, I leave the office, come all the way to Lavington for a meeting. At around 10, one of my colleagues called me. I think it was Patricia, actually. Tells me, cops are here, we have been arrested, and they're asking that you should come. I said, not a problem, I'm coming. But before I left Lavington to go back to our offices at Liaison House, I called our lawyer, Walter, and said, Walter, cops are in the office. I've been told that I need to go back. We are being arrested. He told me, now, I already have 3 problems in the office. If you go back, you're going to be the 4th problem. And not just the 4th problem, but the biggest problem. So you have to disappear. Now, I thought about it. How does a 38-year-old man disappear? I had never been told seriously to disappear. So I process it, and essentially what he's telling me is that you have to go underground. It's a Friday, and somehow people always get arrested here on a Friday. There and then I became a fugitive on the run. I'd never been in such a situation. So I got James Gishuru, Ngong Road, Karen, Crossroads. There's a coffee shop there. I think it was Dorman's or Art Cafe. So I sit there and now start meditating. Where do you go from here? I make a few phone calls, and remember that time I'm using my smartphone, and I'm told if you are being looked for, a smartphone is not what to use. You need to get a mlika mwizi. So I walk around the mall, I get a mlika mwizi with a line, everything. Then I now start making calls. So I wonder now, what do you tell your daughter, Zara? She's somewhere there. How do you tell Zara that you're not coming home? What are you doing? Thought through it, I said, that's an easy one. I always travel, so I've traveled for work. What do you tell your wife? I can't come home, I'm a fugitive. But I called, we had a discussion. I couldn't even say where I was because I'd been told, you never know, maybe her phone is being tapped. So it is good that even when they go and ask her, where is this guy, she'll say, honestly, I don't know where he is. So I wandered around Nairobi Friday afternoon, ended up in a serviced apartment behind Sarit Center until the next week when we could get restraining orders, and then we go back to our business. Now, think about it. You have these lawsuits claiming you've stolen 9 billion. You have this criminal matter. You had to be on the run. Then you go back to work and you have to tell people, I'm an investment manager, please give me your money. I manage for you. We could have very well said, you know what, this is so hard. We are not going to do it. We are going to scatter. But we said, you know what, this is meant to scatter the team. So we are going to find ways around it. We are being painted like fraudsters in town. So the best thing to do is to start analyzing the market for free for everyone. We called it the Cytonn Weekly, just to demonstrate that these are investment professionals and not fraudsters as you see them. There was a claim that, these real estate projects don't exist. So we started something called the free property bus tour. You go see the projects and decide for yourself whether these projects exist. Our products are high-yield products. So there was a talk in town, those returns are not possible. So we started something called wealth management training, where you'd come in and we would teach you how we generate these high-yield products. Now, my point is, all said and done, there are always challenges. The difference between whether you will succeed or not is not not the opportunities that you get. It's a question of how you deal with the challenges that you are confronted with. It could be family. It could be relationship. You heard about Eddie Kimani and his relationship. He didn't sit there whining all the time. In the end, he had to confront the issues and address his relationship. It could be career, or it could be health. You heard about Jay with all the challenges. She didn't sit there all the time just feeling sorry for herself. In the end, she dealt with the challenges. So all of us have challenges. Whether you will succeed or whether you will fail just depends on how you deal with your challenges. It is less about the opportunities that you get. It is more about the challenges that you face and how you deal with those particular challenges. That's what will separate the successful, the average, from those who are not too successful, or in other words, failures. Thank you.